has all been washed and I ironed it. And so the way you want to iron it is, if this is the ironing board, you have your project flipped over, finished side facing down, and then you take your iron and you follow, it's a mixture of following the instructions for your iron and for your fabric, and also for your floss if you're using something other than a cotton material. So I rinse this and let it dry. And then you also either want to wait till it's still a little damp, or if it's totally dry, you can spritz it with some water just to kind of help get the creases out when you steam it. And so what you do is when you're ironing your fabric, you iron it like normal, just iron, iron, iron. But when you get to your stitches, you just kind of lightly press up and move around. Because when it's the fabric, it's fine, but when it's including these stitches, you have to be very careful, especially for more 3D stitches like the French knot or even the satin stitch. And what you can also do is have a press cloth or just a scrap of fabric up on top of that to help with the ironing process and help to protect the stitches. And so it's been all ironed, and so the next step is framing it on a hoop. And so this is why nice wood hoops come in hand. And what you can do with these wooden hoops is you could put ribbon on them, you could paint them, you could stain them. There's a couple of different options. And so basically I'm going to re-hoop it as a final project. Get it pretty centered. Pardon, the wood is so light and moves so quickly. I'm going to hide this. So this is going to be your final hooping. So you want it to be the way you want it to look as a final project. That looks pretty good. We're going to screw that in. I'm going to lightly tug around, like if you were actively embroidering. Screw some more. Make sure everything's nice and even and taut. Ta-da! And so what we're going to do is, now that it's been finally hooped, we're going to trim off some of the excess fabric. You want 1.5 to 2 inches hanging out, depending on how big your project is, depending on how big your hoop is. And I'm just going to trim it, especially because you want it to be a circle. So at the very least, I'm going to be trimming off the corners. And you'll want to use more fabric scissors for these instead of your embroidery scissors. It'll go by a little quicker. And it doesn't have to be approximate. It's just about trimming some of the excess. Okay, it's a little uneven, but you basically still just want a nice border. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over, and be sure to be careful this whole time. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold all this in towards the back of the hoop. So what you're going to also want now is you're going to want some handy pins, like you do for sewing. So what you'll do is, what we're going to do is we're going to pleat this like you would a skirt. And so I'm going to pleat this, stick a pin in to keep its place, and do that every couple of bits. Just kind of work around. Make sure to have plenty of pins, and then the key thing is to catch the pleat like this, because if you don't catch it, then it's, you know, not really a pleat, and it'll come undone. So when you folded everything over, make sure to pin all of it, and you can pin any which way. I will recommend keeping your pins going the same way, just that way you're not pushing yourself all over the place. And you will prick your fingers when you're embroidering sometimes. You can wear thimbles. They have some more rubbery plastic thimbles and all sorts of other thimbles for sewers that you're welcome to try out. You don't prick your finger too much, but it's bound to happen. And so if you feel like it, you want to keep a Band-Aid handy. Usually if you can just prick your finger and not stab your finger, so you should be fine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take some floss. I already have a spare thing of floss. So now we're going to do just a running stitch around, and you can go which way. You can pace your stitching apart any length you want. It's just about catching. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come from underneath this pleating, just so that way this knot isn't facing anything. And always be sure to catch the pleat. So unpin that off to the side. And the nice thing about a running stitch is it can be pretty quick. And so now, since we're finishing up, kind of pull it just a little to help keep everything nice and tight. Because you want it somewhat covered, but a little more folded is nice, but I'm in a hurry. So basically just do our usual knotting. Very nice stitch. No. What I'm going to do, make myself much smaller back stitch real quick. That way I have a little more knot, place to knot my thread real quick right here. So go under the stitch and back through the loop and work it so it's knotted. Ta-da! And that's how you embroider, or do some very basics. One other thing you can do is you could get some felt and cut out a circle and kind of decide what you want to do about this spot. But you can get a piece of felt that's about the same diameter as this and glue it. Some people have stitched it, or at least added a border stitch around it, the felt. And there are also stands. They're little wood stands with a small gap in the middle, and so you can place your hoop like so, although you would have it upside down. So that way it stands versus being hung or propped against something. You can put it on stretched canvas with a craft staple gun or stitching. You can also stitch it on a stretched canvas as well. You can use it for part of a sewing project. Just a couple of myriad different ways you can do embroidery and finish and ways to do a final project. You can embroider on towels. Kitchen towels are always very popular. Clothes too, just all sorts of opportunities. And the skies are kind of limitless.
And one final thing I want to cover are some books about embroidery. There are a couple different kinds of books, but two of the main books I want to really quickly cover are reference books and then project books. So reference books, like so, as an example. Cover a lot about how to get started, like what, it'll cover some of the information we've covered today. It'll also have a myriad of stitches that we didn't cover, and we'll have written instructions on how to do them. But I always stick to, as long as you know the name of the stitch, you can always look up how to do the stitch. Because if I'm not necessarily a reading learner when it comes to crafts, I'm a much more visual learner. And so, for example, if there was a stitch I wanted to learn and the instructions aren't making much sense, I can always go online and look up a video as long as I have that stitch. And that's a lot easier for me to learn, and it might be for you too. And so another kind of book, for example, is more of a project book. It includes some basics on embroidery and how to get started, but it'll be much more concentrated to and related to the projects that they're going to cover. And they're also going to show you some stitches, but they'll basically be the stitches that you'll only need for any of the projects as well. It won't cover every single stitch known to man. It'll just be no more than 10, I would say, most often. And then it'll have the design and then the colors that it wants. It suggests you uses and the stitches that you suggest for these certain projects, and then some extra instructions or extra information. So they're very good, especially if you want to think about stuff creatively. If you want a good project to do and a good way to practice, they're an excellent source of material. And there we are. That should be the basics of embroidery. Go forth and do your design that you have from Fort Bend County Libraries. The best part about embroidery is that it's not just stitching a cutesy phrase or a cutesy design. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. You can create not just things that go on your wall. You can create, embellish your clothes. You can revolutionize your handbags, make great gifts for all sorts of people. And you can make art. People don't always think about cute crafts like as art, but you can create art. You just put your mind to it. So go forth. Have a good day. Bye.